What scares you the most? What's your biggest fear in life? What would make you run in the opposite directions at 100 miles an hour if you encountered it? I was talking to a friend the other day. We were talking about camping. I was telling him about a camping trip. He said, camping? Hey, nature? I have no business in nature. I said, really? Nature has provided me some of the most beautiful and inspiring experiences I've ever had. He said, there's snakes out there in the woods, and I'm scared of snakes. Really? What happened to you? Well, I've never really been in the woods, so nothing happened to me, but that's why nothing's happened, because I don't know how to get out there among those snakes. Well, how did you get so afraid of snakes? And he said that his father was afraid of snakes, and his father passed on that fear to him. And he wasn't really sure where his father got that fear of snakes, but he had it. He remembered him always having it as a child, and he always told these, scary stories about snakes and don't go out there. There's a bunch of snakes there, And so he just internalized this fear. It was passed on to him. And had I not asked him about it, he may have just assumed, well, I'm afraid of snakes because you're supposed to be afraid of snakes, right? Those things will kill you. Well, they won't kill you. Most of them won't. As someone who's been out in the woods a lot, many, many camping trips, I can count on one hand the number of times I've actually seen snakes out in the woods. They don't want anything to do with humans. Snakes want nothing to do with humans, and they're only going to deal with you when they are afraid of you. And they will bite you if you step on one or approach one and scare it. It will bite you to protect itself. But snakes aren't typically chasing people through the woods, okay? In fact, only 10% of all snakes are venomous. So 9 out of 10 times if you get bit by a snake, you're not going to die. You probably aren't going to get very sick. But that's the way fear is, right? It makes everything so dramatic. So I can't even step near woods. I can't even look at the woods. It automatically scares me to look at woods and imagine all the scary things that are out there. And meanwhile, this friend deprived himself of through my lens of my experience, by not going out into the woods and not, being in nature. He deprived himself of some of the most beautiful parts of being human. The world is spectacular, and nature is our base level. It's our base level. We have to be comfortable with nature. So that's the snake fear. What other fears do we have that we pass along from generation to generation? I know a lot of black friends who had fear passed on to them, fear of white people. And they've told me about that, what they heard from their uncles and aunts and parents and grandparents, many of whom had utterly different experiences than young people today. White people will kill you. They're evil. They are conniving, slick, try to mess you up. They don't like us. They hate us. Underhanded, wicked. That's the kind of language that breeds fear. And if you believed that language after hearing it lots of times, you probably wouldn't want to go mess with those white snakes, would you? Meanwhile, this country is about 70% white. So if you never want to be around white people, you're not going to be around the vast majority of the country. And you are depriving yourself of beautiful, beautiful humanity. I say the same thing about interacting with Asians and Latinos and everybody. You just need to be with other people, all right? There's no need to fear other people. Well, Rick, you're going to say that, and you look at history. Yes, history. Today is not then. Today is not 50 years ago. Today is not 100 years ago. Many of those fears that those older generations had were grounded in reality. But that is not today. I was in Savannah. They have a cool amenity in the city of Savannah. They have a cab service that for free will drive you around the entertainment district. They'll take you to clubs, restaurants, bars for free. So this young brother pulls up to take us to a restaurant. And he was asking me about some nice restaurants in the area. Now, he was from Savannah, but I've been to Savannah many, many times. So I brought up a couple of restaurants, and one of them was a place called the Pink House. And he says, oh, yeah, that's amazing. I've heard all kinds of amazing things about it, but I've never been there. I can't go there. It's too expensive and all this. And I could tell that it wasn't just about the money. It was also about the culture, that Black people don't go to those kinds of nice restaurants here in Savannah. That was kind of this fear. Well, that's a white person restaurant. That is your restaurant. That is anybody's restaurant that wants to show up and pay for a meal and drinks. That restaurant is yours to have. So I told him what I did when I was a young man and I was afraid of going to certain places because I didn't feel I belonged there. I was in fear. Was that I learned to address the fear head on by putting myself in the environments that I feared. So, for example, I grew up as a young boy in a lower middle class environment. My family and all the families in my neighborhood, no one had much money. And when you don't have a lot of money, then that means you can only do the things that people who don't have a lot of money do. And some of the things that people who had money, some of the things that they were able to do were things that I wanted to do. But I didn't feel comfortable. I was afraid. It was awkward. It was unfamiliar. One of the things that I was afraid of, well, one of my ambitions was to become very successful. One of my ambitions was to live a life of beauty and to have experiences that were beautiful. I love travel. I love nice restaurants. I love nice hotels, but I didn't feel comfortable there. I didn't know how to use the silverware. I didn't know how to really dress. I didn't know how to act. I didn't know how to do all of those things. I was like a fish out of water. I was afraid. Yeah. Because I didn't know how to behave in those environments. So I would not go into those environments until I decided that I had to face my fear. So I saved up some money and I took myself out to a nice meal when I was 19. $100 meal. I had never spent $100 in my life. But I knew I could buy that experience. I could buy some training. I could train myself out of my fear by exposing myself to the fear. So I walked into this restaurant, dressed as nicely as I could, and I observed how everyone else was behaving. If they seemed comfortable and at ease, that was kind of what I wanted to feel in that environment. I wanted to feel comfortable. I wanted to feel at ease. So I did the kind of things that they were doing. I watched how they talked to the sommelier. I watched how they talked to the maitre d'. I watched how they spoke to the waiter. And I observed how they said things, what they said. What do you do with the cork once the sommelier brings a nice bottle to your table? What do you do when he pours a little tasting of the wine? How do you handle that? I didn't know any of that. I was not brought up in that environment. I had to teach myself how to do that. So I bought the experience and I learned. I did the same thing with nice hotels. I used to be terrified of walking into nice hotels because I didn't know how to act. I didn't feel comfortable. So I saved up some money and I stayed in a really, really nice hotel. And I taught myself how I got myself out of fear because I saw, ain't nothing special about these people. They just know how to do the dance. I didn't know how to do the dance. I didn't know how to do the nice restaurant dance. I didn't know how to do the nice hotel dance. But I've got a sense of rhythm and I can learn. And I learned. I got myself out of fear. What does this have to do with anything for you? Well, let me tell you the downside of fear. The downside of fear is that it is like chumming the waters for aggression. You know, when shark hunters are out in the ocean and they want to bring sharks up to the boat, they will take all the carcasses, the heads and the guts and all the waste product of all the fish that they've caught. They put them in, they have these big buckets, these chum buckets, and they throw that chum out into the water, and the sharks see that blood and they just go into a frenzy. Fear does a similar thing. When you walk into an environment and you are afraid, people sense your fear. People sense your discomfort. And when they sense your fear and your discomfort, that makes you vulnerable if they are not afraid and if they are feeling confident. Now, most people are not going to take advantage of you. But if you come into a situation where you can be taken advantage of and it's to the other party's benefit to take advantage of you, if you come in being afraid and not knowing your game, having your game down, they're going to be aggressive towards you. You ever see a dog react to people who are afraid of dogs? I have a dog who is about as sweet as a dog can be. Loves people, generally speaking. But if you start acting afraid of her and, getting nervous around her, it provokes her. It provokes most animals. Most animals are provoked by the fear of other creatures. It grabs their attention. It makes them almost look at the other creature as prey. So fear has a big price. When you are operating in fear, you are making yourself vulnerable and you are actually inviting problems. So I don't want you to be afraid. I want you to look at what you fear. And one of the first things to say is this my own fear? Am I afraid of snakes because I actually got bit by a snake? Or am I afraid of snakes because someone told me they were afraid of snakes? Am I actually afraid of white people because white people have abused me personally? Or am I afraid of white people because I heard all these horrible stories about white people? Now, for sure, some white people are to be feared. Some portion of all humans of all colors, ethnicities, genders, whatever, are to be feared. But just like snakes, over 90% of them are not poisonous. They don't want to mess with you. They got their own lives. They want to just they want to get home, be with their family, have some food in their belly, just like you. Nobody's sitting around thinking about you, talking about you. Unless you bring attention to yourself with discomfort and fear. And then they will look at you. What's up with this guy? Is that kind of weird? So that's the fix. The fix is exposure. The fix is exposure. One last quick story, because these lessons come to me over and over and over again throughout my life. And this one's a good one for young Black professionals as well. I see a lot of Black professionals talking about the challenge of being in a white corporate environment, and the fear that you have to be 2 times, 5 times better to succeed as a Black person. No, you don't. You just need to meet the standard that we've set in this organization. If the standard is that you produce 5 widgets a day, and you can produce 5 widgets a day, you have a home here in this business. If you can produce 5 widgets a day with some grace and personality and are interesting to be around, you'll do even better. If you, on the other hand, come in here feeling afraid of white people and always wondering, what are they thinking? What are they doing? And why do they do these? What is all this? It makes me crazy. It's because you haven't been around enough white people. They aren't that hard to figure out. You just have to hang around them. But then you start to chill out. Because then you see all of this commonality that we share. Oh, they love their parents like I love mine. Oh, they love their children like I love mine. They're a lot like me in many ways. Why was I so afraid? You were so afraid because you had seeds planted in you that you never challenged. And you just weren't exposed. And so you weren't able to face your fear and disprove your fear with data, with evidence. This isn't that hard. It is not that hard. I understand that fear can feel like a dragon. But dragons, these things that we fear, they're often like dragons that are at the gate, that sit outside the gate of the garden of our greatest desire. These things that scare us, these things that scare us most, are very often this dragon that's sitting at the gate in front of this beautiful, beautiful garden. And if you can face this fear, look that dragon in the eye, he will stand aside, and you will walk into that garden. Face your fear. Peace.